Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. Marianne's taught me that. She's taught me that I am powerful. I am powerful beyond measure, and I know that. And I've found out how to be powerful beyond measure, and I hope that you will come and hear more about results and see how you can be powerful beyond measure, and also go to Marianne's Sister Giant Conference, where is another place you'll find out how to be powerful beyond measure. So please welcome my teacher, my inspiration, my friend, your teacher, your inspiration, and your beloved friend, the magnificent Marianne Williamson.
How are you? Hi! It is so great to be here. This place will always be a second home to me, and it's wonderful to be here. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you, Jim Lee. Thank you, John Conyers. It's just an honor to be here with all of you. I've already seen a lot of old friends here tonight. Thank you, Betty, Mary. I am on the board of directors of Results, and it is one of my most precious activities because, as you have already seen from the film and heard from Sylvia and from Mary, they do such good work. And this is a wonderful time to have the opportunity to talk to you about it tonight, what it signifies, and also what it signifies in terms of the larger context. What does it signify? Well, it means that individuals, much as Mary and Sylvia and the film has made so clear, citizens can come together and they can lobby their congresspeople. They can lobby their congresspeople in order to create the will, the political will, to end the worst ravages of hunger and poverty. Well, that's marvelous. What I want to talk to you about tonight is it shouldn't be so hard. Now, we have 23.1% child poverty rate in the United States. Among 35 developed nations in the world, our child poverty rate is second only to Romania. We have the highest incarceration rate in the world. Our incarceration rate is not only higher than any other nation in the world, but any nation in history. There are 17,000 children who die of starvation on this planet every single day. Every 4 seconds, a child starves to death. We have 46 million people living in poverty in the United States, and globally, we have 1 billion people who live on $1.25 and less a day. That's called deep poverty. And above that, there is another billion people who live on the equivalent of $2 and less a day. Now, we're living an extraordinary time in American history and an extraordinary time in world history. And it could certainly be argued that some of the stress points on this planet are such that nothing short of the survival of the human race as we know it is imperiled. And there is a sense that there is a rising impulse of spirituality and love and enlightenment and consciousness. But you know, a lot of times people who are in the spiritual community, particularly sometimes the more New Thought orientation, particularly sometimes those with this sort of transformational perspective, look at a juxtaposition, which is we're trying to get away from the darkness within ourselves. We're trying to get away from anger. We're trying to get away from all those things that are toxic and mean and corrupt. So when we look at politics, we go, oh, God. I mean, it doesn't get more toxic than that. It doesn't get more mean-spirited than that. It doesn't get more corrupt than that. So we don't want anything to do with that. But this is a conundrum for those of us who are on a spiritual journey. Because a spiritual journey means the journey of the heart. And the journey of the heart means a journey to love. How can you be on a journey to love and ignore the fact that a child is starving? How can you be on a journey of love and deny the fact that so many millions, in fact billions of people on this planet can hardly hold on day to day? So this idea of the intersection of the path of the journey of consciousness with the journey of politics is an absolutely valid conversation, particularly at this time in history. Why is that? Because those of us who are on a spiritual journey, those of us who are on a transformational journey, are learning what it takes to change our lives. And we are all here, all of you who go to Renaissance Unity, all of us who are on any consciousness journey, know that if we are going to change our lives, we're going to have to do more than just tinker with the externals. We have to really think deeply, what am I doing with my life? What really matters? What's my real bottom line? What are the principles on which I say I stand, and do in fact I stand on those? And in the places where I don't, do I need to atone? Do I need to make amends? Where do I have to look at my own character defects? And then we know as individuals that when we address those causal issues, those issues of the heart, those issues of the mind, those issues of ethics, those issues of character, those issues of principles, and we realign ourselves where we need to realign with truly the better angels of our nature, whether we call it the Buddha, the Christ, the Shekinah, whatever it is, that we rise up. And as we rise up in spirit, the universe rearranges itself around us. Now, all that a nation is, all that a civilization is a collection of individuals. So if you have the clues as to what it takes to transform one individual life, then you have the clues to how to transform a country and how to transform a civilization. That means then that the people who have transformational understanding, spiritual understanding, are the last people who should be sitting out these great political and social questions of our day. And yet what we want to do is transform sometimes where it's convenient. We know that love is what matters, but we want to keep it in this bread box. We want to keep it in this corner where it's either convenient, where we don't really have to get our hands dirty, where we don't really have to face things that are too difficult for us to face. Or some people have gotten to the point in our own individual journey where we're willing to do that with ourselves. But we are now standing on the brink of a great unfoldment, I believe, in our country and in our world, where collectively enough of us understand that we must not just address the places where we as individuals might not be standing on the principles that we believe are most important, but where we as a collective must address these issues also. If we say that love is the bottom line, then love cannot just be the bottom line in our individual experience. If love is the bottom line, then love should be the bottom line for a nation. If love is the bottom line in my relationships, then love should be the bottom line in economics. Love should be the bottom line in politics. Either love should be the bottom line or not. And what's happening on the planet today is that we are nearing the end of the survivability of an era in human history where economics is the ordering principle of human civilization. We must move now to a time where humanitarian values and not economic values are the organizing principle of human civilization. I can't even imagine a kind of sort of, sometimes when it's convenient, committed terrorist. Right? Terrorists are people who mean what they say, man. And they have proved in horrifying ways that they will do whatever it takes to effectuate their worldview. Every time that there has been a terrorist act, whether it's domestic or international, the president, whoever the president has been, has always said the following: that this cowardly act will not be tolerated. And every time that that is said, I tilt my head. I can go with unconscionable act, even evil act. But cowardly, I'm not so sure. The truth of the matter is that hatred has a perverse kind of courage. Now, at the same time, many of us, and I certainly have included myself in this at enough times in my life, are kind of sort of casually, when it's convenient, committed to love. So the problem on the planet is not that more people hate than love. Obviously, the vast, vast, vast majority of people in this world love their children, want to make a home for their children, be able to make their way in life, have some good times, and then leave the world to their children better than they found it. So why is it that hatred has such effect on this planet? Well, from a spiritual perspective, let us remember the line in the Course in Miracles. Miracles are born of conviction. Conviction is a force multiplier. The problem is not that there are more people who hate than who love. The problem is that those who hate on this planet hate with conviction. And those of us who love need to get some of that. Right now... Right now, the problem in this country and the problem on this planet is not that those who hate speak so loud. The problem, even bigger than that, is that those of us who love speak too softly. We speak too softly. And for that matter, here we are going to Washington, D.C., seeing almost as the ceiling of our power that we will lobby our congresspeople. Can we have a conversation for a moment, please? It's okay that it's in front of John Conyers because he knows it's true. You know that congressman who spoke on the film that we saw tonight. And he was speaking about Washington, D.C., and he was speaking about Congress, and he was saying this place runs by leverage. Who has leverage? And we, particularly since the Citizens United Supreme Court decision in 2010, we have a country where leverage, what does political leverage mean? It means economic leverage. Now, he was talking about the fact that if somebody doesn't come in and talk to a U.S. congressman or a senator about some poor starving child in Africa, that they wouldn't know about it. Okay, that's legitimate. That is legitimate. But I have one thing to say. This is the United States of America. And because it's the United States of America, that means that anyone who is a citizen, whether they are rich or they are poor, whether they are old or whether they are young, theoretically has the rights to the same opportunities that everybody else does. Therefore, if we are a nation of the people, by the people, and for the people, unless, excuse me, we're changing the contract socially, as we seem to be, into a country of a few of the people, by a few of the people, for a few of the people. And if we're going to have that change in the social contract, we better have a debate about it. And if we had that debate about it, that would mean, excuse me, Senator, or excuse me, Congressman, these children are citizens too. And when we have 23.1% children living in poverty in the United States, why is that? Because they don't have financial leverage. They're children. They don't have economic leverage. And therefore, in a world where elections have practically become auctions in our country, then those who have no economic leverage have no political leverage, which means we have an even bigger problem than the fact that children are living in poverty in the United States. We have an even bigger problem about the connection between poverty and the high incarceration rate, particularly for the Black and Latino communities. We have an even bigger problem than the fact that 46 million Americans live in poverty. We have a problem with a direct attack on democracy itself. The late Supreme Court Justice Louis Brandeis said, you can either have large amounts of money concentrated in the hands of a very few, or you can have democracy. You cannot have both. So I believe at this time in our history, ladies and gentlemen, in order to be the deepest level of citizen globally and of this country, we need to do more than have the audacity of hope. At this point, we need the audacity to wield power. That is what we need now. The audacity to put ourselves out there, perhaps in ways that we have not before, and said love should be the bottom line. And when people say, you are so naive, love should be the bottom line. That is so silly. Love should be the bottom line. There are those who would say that that is naive. Well, I would like to submit to you the idea that those who think we can continue living on this planet the way we are now, that we can continue living with such an unsustainable gap between rich and poor, haves and have-nots in this country and around the world, those who believe that we can continue to foster international relationships with this obsolete belief that the application of brute force should be our soul healing modality and problem-solving tool. Those who believe that we can continue the way we are with so little reverence towards the earth itself. Those who believe that we can live with the lack of justice and brotherhood at the center of the organization of human civilization itself. Those who believe that, who also believe that this species, as we know it, can continue to survive and thrive on this planet for another 100 years. They're naive. They're naive. They're naive. Now, what is the greatness of America? What is the greatness of America? You know, sometimes people talk about this idea of American exceptionalism. Sometimes it's kind of abhorrent to me, as though somehow if one generation is exceptional, they can just bequeath it to the next generation. Not so. Well, is there any validity to this notion of American exceptionalism? Actually, there is. But it's an idea. And it's not yours unless you embody it. What is the exceptionalism of the American idea? The exceptionalism of the American idea was and is a radical thing. And it's the idea that we don't have to do it the same way we did it before. We can do something better. We can do something else. That's what this country was founded on. This country was founded on the notion that the ancient regime of the monarchical system, the ancient regime of an aristocracy, where a king and a queen and the kings and queens' cronies took whatever material resources they wanted. They just sucked up what they wanted. And then whatever they weren't using, they were just allowed to fall like scraps off the table. And then everybody else was a serf who had to just do what they could to divvy up the crumbs, right? Our country was founded on a whole different idea. Our country, the founding of this country was a radical act. It was an act on which people said, no, we don't have to live that way anymore. Actually, all men are created equal. And it doesn't matter who your parents were. And it doesn't matter what your money is. It doesn't matter any of those things. This country will belong to everyone. Now, obviously, as we know, the signers of the Declaration of Independence, the signers of the Constitution, those who wrote and enshrined those very ideas, the majority were themselves slave owners. And that irony was not lost on them either. And the journey of American history has been this journey by which generation after generation, there have been those who said, why don't we take that and really mean it? Why don't we take those ideas of equal opportunity and equal justice and liberty, why don't we take that idea and actually make it manifest? Why don't we make it not just white men? Why don't we make it people of color, too? Why don't we make it women, too? Why don't we make it everyone, not just a few? And through every generation, there have been those, and our generation is no different. There have been those who stood for the possibility of full embodiment of those ideals, and there have been those who stood for squeezing and constricting the idea so that those great principles applied to just the people they wanted to apply it to. And so, those who have said, no, let's really do this thing, let's really stand on this, has never been because the majority woke up one day and said, oh, let's do. The majority did not wake up one day and go, let's free the slaves. The majority did not wake up one day and say, oh, why don't we give women the right to vote? Anytime there has been a great movement forward in the history of social justice in the United States, it was because of a small group of people considered outrageous radicals by the status quo of their time. Had a better idea. And it was always despite what the majority at that time believed. This is always how evolution operates, whether it's in the affairs of humanity or physically. If a system or if a species is moving in a direction that is not well adapted for its survival, then a mutation occurs. And then even though the mutation only represents a small number of the members of that species, the entire system then moves in the direction of the mutation or it goes extinct. And so in the affairs of humanity, just as in the affairs of physical anthropology, there are times when we are moving in a direction no longer well adapted for our survival. The human race right now, ladies and gentlemen, is moving in a direction not well adapted for the survival of our species. We fight too much and with weapons of mass destruction that absolutely cannot be borne by any level of warfare and still be tolerable for the survival of the human race. And so, just as there were those in our history, and they did it for us. They did it for us. For every African American in this room, nobody has to remind any African American in this room the sacrifices that were made by those who stood up for the abolition of slavery and made it happen. And no woman in this room should have to be reminded of the sacrifices that were made by the early suffragettes who sacrificed greatly so that women would have the right to vote in the United States. Sometimes we act as though history somehow stopped with us. Sometimes we act as though every battle has been won. Well, no, not every battle has been won. On the other hand, enough of them have been won that in some ways, and I think this is particularly true for women, we should be talking a little bit less in certain ways about getting more power and more using the power that we have. If the American woman was awake, there would not be 23.1% child poverty rate in the United States. If the American woman simply said, no, we're not angry, it's just that this shit has to stop, it would stop. It would stop. Do you know that in the U.S. Congress, fewer than 17% of our congressional and senatorial representatives are women. Can't blame Michigan for that with a woman senator, and you have certainly women congresspeople. But in the U.S. Congress, fewer than 17% of our elected representatives are women. On the level of state legislature, fewer than 24% are women. Women are 51% of the population. We're hardly a special interest group. So Mary mentioned an event that I did in Los Angeles that some of you were there for. Betty, you were there. Mary, a few of you were there. It was a marvelous event. It was called Sister Giant, Awaking the Sleeping Giant of American Womanhood. And we took 3 films. One is a film that was made by the Canadian Film Board called The Burning Times. And it was about the witch burnings during the Middle Ages and this kind of notion of a cellular memory that women have. You know, one of the things that we talk about quite a bit is this idea, when Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation, with a stroke of the presidential pen, they were able to abolish the external institution of slavery. With the 13th Amendment, they were able to abolish the external institution of slavery. But no external measure could abolish racism. And in some ways, racism burrowed down even deeper in certain places after the Civil War, John Birch Society, and many things such as that. Similarly, it's true with women. We don't burn women at the stake anymore. But we still have not yet withdrawn the projection onto powerful women who speak their minds of some level of suspicion. In some ways, I always say they just changed the consonant from W to B. She's a witch, she's a witch, she's a witch, turned into she's a bitch, she's a bitch, she's a bitch. And you know, I know something about that. And so a lot of the external changes that have already been made, in order for us to truly get to the root causes of these issues, we need to bring some of the changes in our own heart that need most be brought to bear. After that, we watched a film that weekend of the witches and this idea of what makes the Western woman relatively quiet. Why are we not speaking up about these things? You know, people in churches like this, we talk about how you can be successful. You know, there's a woman named the actress Eva Longoria who did a video in support of Sister Giant. I am so impressed by her because she did this video. She talked about child poverty. She talked about incarceration. She talked about how we have not only a dropout rate in the American schools, we have a push-out rate and the systematic way in which people, particularly of color, black people and Latino people, are actually seen as perfect for that profit center called the military-industrial complex. I am so impressed by Eva Longoria. She does not need to do this. She is an example of the American woman and the ethos that must happen next. She has taken that journey from success to significance. You come to churches like this, and one of the things Jim Lee and Rick and everybody's going to teach you is how to get through the blocks to your own success. Come on, be successful. Everybody, let's be successful, because now we have to become significant. 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 And so we watched this film that was a special made by HBO on several years ago with Hilary Swank and Angelica Houston. And it was a wonderful drama. I'm sure you can get it on Netflix or something about Alice Paul, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, Susan B. Anthony. And I think too many American women do not know the history of the suffragette movement. And as I said before, the extraordinary sacrifices that were made. The third film that we watched is a documentary by Abigail Disney called Pray the Devil Back to Hell. When American women see what African women are doing in places like Liberia, women who have a fraction of what we have, who have a fraction of the powers that we have a fraction of the material resources that we have a fraction of the political influence that we have, and what they have done in Liberia and elsewhere. Somebody said to me in an interview once, what should American women feel when we look at what women in Africa and other places have achieved? My word was shame. Healthy shame. Healthy shame. But you know, they look at us, they look at American women and go, what are you thinking? What are you thinking? So Sister Giant this time is called Women, Nonviolence, and Birthing a New American Politics. We need a politics of conscience in the United States. You know, at these presidential debates, at these presidential debates, and I'm sure you all know who I'm voting for. We don't need to go there. Not one question has been asked in these debates about child poverty. Not one question has been asked about poverty, period. Not one question has been asked about the high incarceration rate. Not one question has been asked about campaign finance and the buying and the selling of American democracy. The chokehold that the Democratic and the Republican parties have on the conversation itself. Remember when I said earlier, what is exceptional about America? What is exceptional about America is that the American has this way about us. It's a characterological strength. We go, oh, I have a great idea, let's do it this way. And we have, with this extraordinary, exceptional aspect of the American character, we have transformed everything. Look at churches like this. This isn't a church that follows all the traditional dictates of the Christian church. Because somebody said, ooh, let's do it a different way. In business, people say, ooh, let's do it a different way. In medicine and healing, people have gone, ooh, let's do it a different way. In the arts and computer technology and media and everything, the Americans have transformed the world by going, ooh, let's do it a different way. Where not, except, ladies and gentlemen, in politics. There is a myth that is created that the conversation that now dominates the political contest is the only conversation we can have. It's like we're always like this, okay. And it's interesting about the Democrats and the Republicans because they seem to think they represent the mainstream of America. But you know what the truth of the matter is? Mainstream means majority. And with all due respect, and once again, I hope the Democrats win. With all due respect, the majority would love to say none of the above at this point. The majority would love a new conversation. So I hope both Democrats and Republicans get reminded of their souls, because you know what? Child poverty should not be a right-left issue. The high incarceration rate should not be a left-right issue. Global poverty should not be a left-right issue. But in a way, there is even a little bit of an illusion even there. Because the illusion is that it's the real dichotomy of our time is between left and right. But the deeper, darker dichotomy of our time is between those who believe that money should buy political influence versus those who believe that the heart and the soul, not only of the human being, but of the greater possibility of this United States, which after all, when our founders said Novus Ordo Seclorum, they said new order of the ages, that here anything was possible. So I believe that anything should be possible, not only in religion and philosophy, anything should be possible not only in business, anything should be possible not only in medicine and healing. Ladies and gentlemen, we believe in miracles. The very fact that this country was founded was a miracle. We need a few of them right now. And those of us who believe in miracles have a part to play. You know, I believe that one of the reasons that the Titanic is such an archetype that people relate to is not just because it was a good movie. People relate to this image of the archetype of the Titanic because on some level we feel like we're on it. And that iceberg could take a lot of different forms. It could take the form of a nuclear disaster. It could take the form of a biochemical disaster. It could take the form of weather catastrophe. There are many forms the iceberg could take, but there is this underlying dark sense that we're headed towards the iceberg. And you know, those big boats take a long time to slow down and turn around too. Now, when the actual Titanic was headed towards the iceberg, what had happened? The captain of the ship knew that they shouldn't go so far north. The captain of the ship knew that they shouldn't gun those engines the way they did. And he did protest, but the money man shouted him down. What did he then do? He went down into his cabin and went to sleep. Don't you just love the imagery? It's like the disciples falling asleep in the Garden of Gethsemane the night before the crucifixion. Not just because it was late at night, but because it was so painful knowing what was about to happen. Ladies and gentlemen, this time around, we're all on the Titanic, but more than that, we are all the captain. Let us not go to sleep. Let us not go down into our bedchamber. Let us be awake and let us grab this wheel. Let us grab this wheel. However, this is the thing. Things right now have already gotten to the point, if you talk to the real environmentalists, they're no longer talking about stopping the catastrophes ahead. They're talking now about just accommodating with the catastrophes weather-wise that lie ahead. So if you look just with the rational mind, at what's coming down the pike in the next 20 years in the United States, the trajectories of probability are very, very grim. That's where people who believe in miracles come in. Those of us who know that you can change a probability into a possibility. You can part those waters. Why? Because we believe those things. You can completely transcend the laws of time and space as you know them. Why? We believe in those things. And our field is about the inner technology that makes it happen. We understand that a nation needs to confess. A nation needs to atone for its sins. A nation needs to look into its heart, just like individuals do. And when we contribute that voice, and there are those who would say, well, that's the silliest thing I've ever heard. I am reminded of what happened when I was very front lines in the early days of the AIDS crisis. And what happened in the very earliest days of the AIDS crisis was that Western allopathic medicine for quite a while, not that it didn't try, and not that I don't honor the advances that it has made now in the treatment of AIDS. Early days, they had nothing to offer, and they kept trying. They took card out, card out, card out. Finally, they played all their cards, and there was nothing. But during that time, they used to look at people like me, Jim, those of us who did spiritual groups, with a very condescending attitude, with a very patronizing attitude. Well, if you make them feel better, that's nice. But I was right up to their eyeballs when I saw all that arrogance dissolve. I was right in front of them when I saw those condescending, patronizing attitudes begin to fall away. As the people in the Western allopathic community began to say to those of us who were teaching people with AIDS the importance of forgiveness and the importance of prayer and the importance of love and the importance of cleaning out your heart, and began to say to us, what have you got? Well, guess what? Now, all these years later, the most prestigious academic institutions in the United States have statistically verified that people who have been diagnosed with life-challenging illnesses, who attend spiritual support groups, live on average twice as long after diagnosis as those who don't. Guess what? Politicians now are where doctors used to be. They're not saying this in front of the microphone yet, and they're not saying it in front of the lights, but they're saying it among themselves. They're as scared as the rest of us, and they're beginning to say to many of us, what have you got? Ladies and gentlemen, they're not holding us back. The only chains that are holding any of us back right now are the internal chains that bind us. What are we afraid of? They're going to embarrass us. We, a generation here in the United States, they're not going to shoot us. We're not afraid of that. Women, we're afraid they're going to embarrass us. We're afraid we're going to feel embarrassed. We're afraid we're going to feel humiliated. And I do think that that is part of that memory of cellular memory. But you know what? As Martin Luther King said, if you don't have a cause worth dying for, you don't yet have a life worth living. So at the deepest level, what if they do whatever they might do to stand in the way of that progress? We must be like every generation before us. We must be like the generation that stood up for abolition of slavery. We must be like the generation that stood up for women's suffrage. We must be like everybody, not only in history, but on the planet right now, who is standing up to unjust systems and say, you know what, that simply will not do. And I know two main groups of people. I know a group of people who know everything that there is to know about politics, but they're babies on the journey of consciousness. And then I know all these people who are so advanced on the journey of consciousness, but it's like you don't remember even the civics you learned in the 7th grade. You're kind of babies in the field of politics. Guess what, everybody? Those people know so much about politics, but they don't know about consciousness. Takes a lot of years to learn this consciousness stuff. But anybody here who might know everything that there is about consciousness, or at least you're really on the path, but you kind of forgot a lot of the political stuff, you don't quite know the issues, you don't know the statistics when it comes to child poverty, high incarceration, Citizens United, give me a weekend or two, I'll tell you everything you need to know. I hope you will be at Sister Giant, be in LA, or live stream. Be just as participatory by being here on live stream. And you know I mean this. Don't let California do it all. There ain't nobody like Michiganders. Thank you very, very